At 6:04 a.m. on January 29, 2022, the alarm bell sounded in Canton Fire Department. Firefighter paramedic Timothy Nuttall knew what that meant. His heart skipped a beat. He raced to his equipment and he picked up his bag, which was meticulous. There was a sign and a signal, and then there was a voice commanding that there was cardiac arrest. The most serious of calls for a firefighter and paramedic, that means that a person's heart has stopped. He didn't know who it was. He didn't know where it was. He took his bag. He had just got into the station, and he rushed to the ambulance. As the car pulled up the 34 Fairview, the ambulance, he stood at the back door, and the doors open, and he stepped out into that building. You could hear a woman screaming and shrieking, the cold, hard air slapping on his face, and the wind, blizzard conditions swirling around him. And when he got there, he saw 3-1 surrounding a man lying, not moving on the ground. He walked up to the man, and he reached down and tried to find any signs of life, pulse, anything. And he found nothing. Now, he wanted any information. He doesn't, when you're trying to save someone, you want to know, are they on drugs, medications, or they have a heart condition? And he looked up at Miss Reed and he said, "What happened?" And you'll hear her words to a firefighter Nuttall. She said, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." And it was at that time, through the words of the defendant, that she admitted what she had done that night, that she hit John O'Keefe. So why are we here today? We are here today because John O'Keefe was killed by the actions and conduct of that defendant, Sharon Reed. Now, before I tell you about the data and the facts and the science, and I walk you through that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about John O'Keefe. John O'Keefe was a young man, a local kid, very well liked. Well, John O'Keefe is the son of Peggy O'Keefe.
Personalizing it to the victim, good idea.
And the brother of Wallow. Grew up in Canton, worked hard. He became a police officer. But what you're going to learn, the fact that he worked for the Boston police officer, as a Boston police officer, is a fact for his life. Enter Sharon Reed.
Excellent.
Around COVID, the defendants and Mr. O'Keefe reacquainted, and they started a relationship. And you'll hear that even though the defendant had her own home, she was staying with Mr. O'Keefe a lot, 4, 5, 6 times a week. So I want to take you back to the timeline that night. After the discord, both the defendant and Mr. O'Keefe decided they would meet at a bar called McCarthy's. Down McCarthy's is a local bar. A blizzard is pending, and people are getting together in a celebratory mood. They go to McCarthy's, and you'll see a video of the party, and you will watch both Mr. O'Keefe, friends, and defendant drinking alcohol, and you will count 8 their brands that the defendant drank. They arrived at 8:50. They stayed till 9:45. So the reset and little drinks in less than 2 hours. The last ring, you'll see where they leave the bar. She puts it under her jacket, and they walk out, and they go to another bar to the other friend. It's called the Waterfall. And so they leave the Waterfall, and you'll see that the ignition goes on to the defendant's Lexus. And both John O'Keefe and the defendant in their car, they decide that they're going to go back 34 Fairview Road, where we talked about earlier. They're going to go there for a get-together for one of the homeowner's sons who's had a birthday party. You will know that John O'Keefe was in that car, that Lexus, and didn't move because his healthcare data is not moving. It's not moving until 12:31:56. At 12:31:56, he begins to move. You will have 20 seconds before he falls. 20 seconds. He gets out of the car, the Lexus, and in that 20 seconds, you'll hear that user initiated. He looks at the phone, at the text message he demarcates. It's now 12:32:09. He closes the phone. The last time will be the last time he uses that phone.
on the waterfall bar, you'll see that back pocket. And at that time, 12:32:09, last user, he has 7 more seconds he will move before he lie dormant the rest of the night. We'll also have the information come to the defendant's Lexus black box. Now the clocks run differently. There's a 30-second variance, but it's right in the heart of that time. And you will see, view the data, at that time, when he makes his last movements with the phone, is when her car leaves 34 feet at least, stops, wiggle, and then shoots into reverse at the tires spinning right towards it. She drives away. They said she's made later statements that when she left, he didn't look mortally wounded. He lied on the ground on top of his phone, light dusting of snow, is snow now picking up, and he's just there. It's 12:37.
This is good.
In the car, before it gets to Fairview, the battery temperature of that phone is 77 degrees. 77 degrees in the warm car. Now that you've been outside the park for 5 minutes, drops to 72 degrees. She drives to his house. She makes a phone call at 12:33 after she's left there. She calls again at 12:36:33 and leaves a message. We'll hear it. And you will hear the anger and rage in her voice. She leaves a message. John, I fucking hate you. Pardon my language. You will hear the simmering. And she leaves that message. She lies on the side of the road. He gets another text message that's unanswered. He done me a favor. Where are you? 12:45. Battery's up, sure. 1 degree. The evidence will make clear that she knew he was there. She did not call 911. She did not go back to him. She did not leave an anonymous note. She left. The night wears on. It's now 1:07. Battery temperature 55 degrees. 1:14, she calls her mother. No answer. 1:14:53. Battery temperature 50 degrees. At that point, the defendant insists they got to go back to Fairview Road. They decide to take one car. Carrie Roberts is taking charge. She's going to drive. They leave Miss Reed's Lexus and John Steve's driveway, and they drive back towards Fairview Road to look at it. It is blizzard-like condition. It is dark. They can barely see a thing. And when they get close to the edge of 34 Fairview, you hear the defendant start to scream, "There he is!" Both women look and they can't see anything. She starts kicking the door. The defendant's kicking the door, "Let me out." Carrie Roberts stops the car and lets her out, and she sees the defendant run exactly to where John O'Keefe is in the darkness. Just where she left him. And you learn that when police start getting some of the information, they learn about the broken taillight, they learn information that she had told people that she had picked him. They went down to see her, and on their way down, they decided they would get a warrant to take the Lexus. When they get down to Dykeon, where the car is, you'll hear from Trooper Buchanan, who put a loading, even this going. They went in and spoke briefly to the defendant. They put in the car, they brought it back to camping. And so, what to learn from the forensic evidence that will help with the sciencey data is that not only was the cell phone left behind, but also around that area, broken taillights was littered around John O'Keefe's body. Ultimately, they would find over the course of 10 days, it was so melted, almost all every piece of that broken taillight in that area. The sneaker, the glass. When the defendant left Mr. O'Keefe behind, took with her something of Mr. O'Keefe called trace evidence. You'll learn on the back of her Lexus, around the taillight area, is John's DNA, and stuck to the side, grasping one last piece of John O'Keefe's kit. You're also going to hear from an active reconstruction. His name is John Welton. Does not work for the state police of local police. He was hired to take a look at this case and the data. They will come in and explain to you exactly what I talked about, how the data from that black box coincides with the cell phone, in the movements of the car, the moments before, during, and after the defendant struck Donald Keefe with her car. Now, just a few more things I want to share with you. There are 3 charges against the defendant in this case. The first one, second-degree murder. When most people hear murder, they instantly think shooting somebody, stabbing somebody, putting deliberate premeditation. Or I will start doing the laws. I'm not going to travel in that area, but I can tell you clearly, we are not going to try to prove that Kara Reed tried to kill John O'Keefe. We're not going to try to prove to you that she intended or wanted him dead. That's not second-degree murder. What will prove to you is she engaged in an intentional act, driving back at him at that speed, in the storm, in the darkness, knowing that he had just gotten out of her lessons. She intended that act would cause the plain, the strong likelihood of death. That's what will teach second-degree murder. This case will come down to the science and the data. The science and the data that cell phone, they produce the best of historians. It doesn't suffer from intoxication. It doesn't suffer from memory loss. It doesn't suffer from emotion, pride, or prejudice. It is facts. It is data. And that facts and data will lead you to the truth in this case. And her statements to you will confirm what you already know on the science and the data. What you will already conclude from the facts independent about what she did that night. Her word is simply firm. And good judgment and sound. That you're going to hear from her own lips, many of her statements, her admissions to extraordinary intoxications, her admissions to driving in the ELS, her admissions to being angry at dawn that night. And I dare say her admissions that she told.
I mean, I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee and incapacitated him? He didn't look mortally wounded as far as I could see, but could I have done something that knocked him out and in drunkenness and in the cold didn't come to again?
And this would have been the moment you dropped him off at the party.
Yeah, would have had to.
Ooh.
Ladies and gentlemen, I simply ask you to follow the evidence, follow the science, follow the data. Ignore speculation, surmise, conjecture. Stay true to the evidence. It will lead you to the truth. That on January 29, 2022, a very intoxicated defendant was angry and arguing about the relationship with John O'Keefe. And after the fight was over, she left, but she brought the fight back in the form of her SUV. She clipped him, he fell backwards, he broke his head, and then this man who a lifetime of hope.
New donation from the Redneck Ram.
Thank you, Redneck, for the super chat.
I with no help. The facts, the data, and the evidence will bring you the truth, and the defendant's own words will confirm everything the lawyer can prove.
All right, guys. All right, here's an unpopular hot take. And I swear I'm not saying it just to be contrarian. I'm just going to tell you what I think. That opening was essentially perfect. That was flawless. I could critique it. I could nitpick it, but why? There's no reason to do so. It was an essentially flawless opening from beginning to end. He started with a very imageristic heavy opening referring to getting the call relating to the 911 call, the firefighter hearing the alarm bell ring. He starts off with this imageristic excitement, energy that gets you invested into the action of the thing and gets you to the scene of the crime with everything there. He then, after he does that, he then transitions to talk about the victim, talk about his life and who he was, make it personal. He talks about the person who they were, talked about it, and then he talked about the evidence that would be heard, and he integrated it with story. The story dominated. He told story, and then he put in little pieces along the way of evidence he will show and witnesses that will highlight that story, but showed you, but it was very well integrated. and it was all in the service of the story and this narrative arc. He brought in the evidence when it needed to be as spice to bring you to where you want to be. And then he has this clip, which, out of context or not, makes Karen Reed basically look like she admitted to doing it. Now, you probably think that she was just admitting to what could be possible. But I mean, the words speak for themselves and the words resonate powerfully. And he basically ends that way. He ends on that clip essentially. And then he has a few like parting words to close things out. But it was essentially perfect, not 9.8 out of 10, as opposed to what Lowley did in the first opening, which was no story. It was just fact after fact after fact. And Lowley drowned in incredibly precise, incredibly detailed things that you just don't need an opening. That's not what opening's for. He was drowning in specifics. He was drowning in technical. There was no particular story in Lowley's opening. There was no particular connecting thread. It was just fact after fact after fact, and it was mind-numbing. It was mind-numbing and impossible to follow. Brennan's opening is essentially flawless. It did exactly what you want to do. It told a story. It had a cohesive narrative arc. It just told you the story. It laid out the framework. That's all opening has to do. Provides the framework. You don't necessarily have to provide any facts in opening. You don't really have to, because all you're trying to do is present the story and the arc, and you provide little pieces along the way to connect the story. And then he drops in the evidence that he believes he has to Marshall for his story. And he has this banger of what appears to be an admission by Karen Reed in her own words, from her own voice, on video, basically to close out the whole thing. It was perfect. It was perfect. He used good control of the room, good pacing, good the only real criticisms I could have is relating to his natural voice. His natural voice is a little monotone, so it could have more vocal variety for my taste, but he had vocal variety within his own range. He should probably work to improve his range, but within his range, he had vocal variety. It was captivating. It was entertaining. It was persuasive. It was convincing. It laid out a strong case. It he also sort of lays clear what he is and is not going to try to prove. He doesn't necessarily need to prove that Karen Reed had the intent to kill. That's not what he needs to prove. He needs to prove that she intended the act that led to the death. So, he doesn't need to prove, and he's right. He doesn't need to prove that Karen Reed had a desire to kill. He doesn't need to prove that. He needs to prove that she intended the act and performed the act that caused the death. And so basically he clarifies his own burden of proof as well to specify that. I mean, it's perfect. I mean 9.8. Could have used a little bit more vocal variety, maybe. Something to work on for the future. You're a little monotone, maybe, but basically flawless. Perhaps could have been a bit shorter, maybe, but it didn't overstay its welcome. I didn't feel at any point like there was any repetition or things that were unneeded. You could have done maybe the kill your darlings idea. Maybe you could have killed some things that were even good, maybe in service of the better story, maybe to try to reduce the length of the time, but it wasn't unduly long. It was essentially perfect. And then anything after that is just taste. Anything after that is just like what would I like or what wouldn't I like? Like, and also, by the way, just because this is essentially perfect of an opening doesn't mean that this is the only way to do an opening. There are other ways to do openings. Like there's other ways to do this that would also be perfect, but this version of it was perfect. Right? This version of perfect. It told its story. There are other ways to tell stories, right? There are different kinds of stories, but this version of it was perfect. So there are, you know, a lot of different ways to potentially skin the animal, and there are many different possible perfect stories, and his was about as perfect as it gets. So from opening, he struck a strong blow. He has set the scene. He has set the scene for success. He has set the scene, and then presumably he's going to call his witnesses in an order and in a way to facilitate the story. Then, you know, what you want to do is you've provided the drop-in points. Then what you want to do ideally is you call your witnesses in order to drop things into the order, preferably. That's not always possible because not every witness can fit neatly into a particular part of the story. So sometimes you have to tell it a little bit out of sequence. But you drop your witnesses ideally as possible into the order. You highlight what you need to highlight, and then basically in close, you basically filled in the gaps, and bingo bango, you've got yourself one hell of a speech. You got yourself one hell of a speech. Karen Reed is in a lot more trouble with version 2.0 than version 1.0. Like that speech, that opening right there, that opening is a speech that will condemn a person. And it's primacy and recency, guys. It's primacy and recency. It's the first thing they heard. It's the first thing they heard. It's powerful. It's organized. It's detailed. It's emotional. But it not overly so. It's not like sycophantic. Um, it's not trite. It uses emotionality in great measure with fact and lays everything out just in a essentially perfect story. Now, of course, he has evidentiary problems. You and I both know he has evidentiary problems, but the jury doesn't know that. The jury doesn't know that. And how that's going to all play out, I don't know. I don't know, but I do know that you got primacy and recency, and he's literally the first thing they heard is a strong connecting tissue that if he can play this right, if he can make this work, and he has challenges, but if he can play this right, if he can make this work, if he can do this, if he can close as well as he opened, you know, then he probably's got it. And then it's just up for the defense to be able to kick ass. The defense has to just kick all the ass. But you know, right now you have to give it to him to favor him. It's like right now the odds just favor him, and that's just the truth of the situation. I you know, that's where we're at least in my humble opinion.